You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seat belts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast. This week, we're doing another interview, but this one's going to be a little bit different than some of our previous ones. We're actually interviewing a friend of mine who is from Australia and is one of the largest single vendors in the continent, but we're interviewing him about technology and what it means for the industry, because he's very keen on using technology to your advantage to make work more efficient. And having operated at every level of the game, he is very knowledgeable and has a lot of good insight. So his name is Nick. And without further ado, we'll get it started.
All right, everybody. Halt here with Nick from MtGMate. And so we just want to discuss, how you're interested in both Magic and technology development kind of evolved and brought you to where you are. And we'll start out pretty easy. Like everybody, we all got into Magic at some point in time. Some way. For a lot of people, it's grade school. People are playing cards at recess. How did you get into Magic?
That's a pretty funny story, Peter. So my parents, I want to say in the early 2000s, were looking at opening a game store.
Oh, okay.
And in order to do that, they sort of had a look at some other local game stores that were in the area, and one of them was a store that did trading card games. And so they took me along. It was like a Wednesday night or something. The store was pretty empty, but the guy behind the counter there was just a wealth of information and sort of told them all the ins and outs of the business. Way more information than he probably should have shared. And they did Pokemon, they did Magic, and they did they're an internet cafe as well.
Oh, okay. And
they kind of like felt that they should buy something given all the information that he gave them. And so they asked me, like, what do you want? Do you want anything from the store? And I was like, oh, this Magic thing sounds pretty good. Can I get the 8th edition starter deck? And that's pretty much what started me on the slippery slope of collecting expensive cardboard rectangles. I'd always played Pokemon a little bit, and I sort of collected the cards as well. And so this new game seemed pretty cool, and I took it to my best friend. And we both played with the starter deck, and I think his mum worked at like a Target, and she got us some of the discounted cards that were selling out and stuff. And he sort of never really got into the game much further than playing on the kitchen table, but I wanted to make the jump into like more competitive play or play other people and stuff like that. And then from there I met a bunch of the friends that I still have today. And would travel on the train every Friday into the city to play Magic. This was about Onslaught Mirrodin was the format of Standard at the time. And that's pretty much how I got started. No one really showed me the game. It was just more like my parents felt they needed to buy something, and I was like, oh, I'll give this Magic thing a go.
Yeah. Aside from that story is actually very similar to how I got started, especially right around that time. I think the first packs that I ended up buying were like Torment, but I didn't actually begin playing until Legions.
Oh, okay.
So, months ahead of you. But similarly, I had friends that also played because their older siblings played, and the cards got handed down. And so we just kind of played casually, except for one friend of mine. And every Friday, let's see, so, yeah, Onslaught... I did build Slide very soon after Onslaught hit. So we were just driving over another town to go play competitive FNMs. And it's a story I remember fondly. It's a time I remember fondly. And from there, that springboarded me, like, those couple sets to the friends I still have now who still played competitively, but only after moving away to college.
Yep.
So you are also a vendor of sorts.
Yes. Right? So I own a business called MtGMate. mtgmate.com.au, and we are an online vendor of Magic the Gathering singles in Australia. It's a company I started in 2018, and yeah, things are going well. I've always sort of like been in the vending space for the last 10 or so years. I worked at some other stores and helped run their events at various GPs and stuff like that. And when I first started playing Magic, I really sort of had that penchant for trading and hustling, because, you know, being a 16-year-old with not a whole lot of money, you sort of have to get the most out of your cards and trying to find those new things you need for the next deck, or, you know, when Tooth and Nail isn't quite working as well as you want it to, you want to build a different deck, and you've got to try and convert your cards you have into
Ravager
cards
Affinity.
Yeah. Well, things that beat Ravager Affinity.
Fair. But and this is kind of interesting because we never really had the opportunity to talk to somebody from another region, let alone the APAC region, which seems kind of difficult to work in if you aren't like mainland Asia. But at the same time, it provides or has provided some interesting opportunity. And I know this is well before your time, but sets like Portal 3 Kingdom were very well distributed to the APAC region.
Yeah. So, like, you know, there was stories about like people buying P3K and sending it overseas because it was super rare. And then I remember when I first sort of went to the States, people would be like, do you have lots of P3K stuff? And it's like, I don't even know what this set is.
Yeah.
And you sort of discover like, oh, it's this exclusive set to Australia and New Zealand, I believe, that virtually never saw the cards, probably because they weren't tournament legal. And I think a few other people, you know, before my time, figured out that there were markets for these things, especially when they banned Portal, and all those sort of cards disappeared and removed themselves from the local card pool. But I think very early on I was exposed to the different regions and stuff like that. I have fond memories of like there was a guy who would travel from New Zealand, and he would have various Magic cards that we just couldn't get our hands on. I distinctly remember Plow Under being like $18 in Scry, but the local value was like $35 because everyone wanted to play Plow Under in their Astral Slide, Eternal Witness deck. And that was sort of my first experience of like different markets having different values on cards.
And so, has that kind of been a through line for you as a business owner with MtGMate?
I think there are like I've learned a lot about the different markets since I started the company. I have some good friends in Japan, and I used to visit Japan quite frequently prior to COVID. And you would learn like which cards are Japan cards, like which kind of things that they found very popular and stuff like that. I think like for Australia though, like we just have, there's less people, there's less cards, so like it's not so much that cards are more popular in Australia, it's just that they're harder to find sometimes.
Okay.
Like a really good example at the moment is like Mystic Remora. You know, there's tons of Ice Age out there, but it hasn't really had many reprints, and it still commands quite a premium in Australia because there's just not enough copies locally to buy from players. Everyone that has a copy has it in their EDH deck. Like they're not letting go of it, and you know, I know Ice Age was a heavily open set, but like probably more so in North America than it was opened in Australia at that time.
So this is kind of going off script, but you made me think about it. Bring up Mystic Remora. Is Australian Highlander as popular as some people make it out to be?
It's reasonably popular. I don't think it's everyone is playing it, but I think a lot of people that play competitive Magic probably have experienced Australian Highlander in some fashion. And in the last couple of years, it's really started to pick up. It used to be a thing that was sort of just localized to a couple of states. So in particular, Melbourne and Canberra were the two major states that played 7-point Highlander. They used to actually have two different points lists, and I'm not a historian, and this is well before my time. But like they got together and like I think one was a 7-point list and one was a 10-point list, and they got together and formed a committee, and they've standardized Highlander across the country.
Nice.
And so Highlander is something that I've been playing for, I think, since about 2010 when I started to travel for Magic. But I never really played it a lot, it was just a side event that was at various things like nationals or GPs and stuff
Okay.
like that. But in the last 5 or so years, it's really started to pick up and expand across the country.
Yeah.
Like Brisbane, where I'm from, never had a community, and now it does. There's a community in Brisbane. There's a community in Toowoomba, which is about a 2-hour drive from Brisbane. There's a whole community in Perth, which is the other side of the country, that never existed before. And I believe Adelaide has a pretty strong Eternal scene, and there's been a lot of champions of the format there. So it's definitely gone from like, a fairly niche thing to like 1 or 2 states to having like much broader appeal.
Yeah.
And there's different meta games and stuff as well. Like I know that the Queensland, which is the state that I'm from, the metagame there favors Underworld Breach decks a lot, and like Melbourne in particular favors like Farse's Oracle as the premier combo deck. But yeah, it's definitely really started to pick up, and like I know that when I'm acquiring cards overseas, there are certain things that I'll pick up that are quite popular in the format. I think they're also just popular in Commander as well.
Yeah.
And other formats, but yeah, it's definitely been like things that we've got more players in Brisbane than I could have dreamed of like 5 or 6 years ago. I think our Highlander turnout is like at least 30 people on the monthly kind of event. And I know people are always brewing decks and they have different decks on the go. It's similar to like Commander where you have an idea and you can run with it. And
Yeah.
there's a bunch of staple cards that you include in most blue decks or whatever, and then you evolve the rest of the deck idea from there.
Yeah. A few people I know have bought into Canlander, just the Canadian Highlander version.
Yeah.
And I never got a whole lot of experience to the Australian variant. I mainly caught it in articles on MTG The Source from the Adelaide Eternal group. Yep. They would drive to go play, and like their Shortcake player, the red-white painter servant grindstone player who writes amazing reports, would talk about Australian Highlander here and there throughout the article. And I know somebody who's from Australia that plays as well, so it's always just kind of like floated around. So I thought I'd float the question.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really enjoying Australian 7-Point Highlander at the moment. It's probably my favorite format to play, and that used to be Legacy and Vintage, but Vintage is sort of gone the way of the way of telegrams and VHS and stuff like that. But like I really enjoy like the diversity of games and the diversity of decks. Whereas like Legacy, especially if you're playing with the same group, can get a little bit stale unless you have like a couple of those people that have big collections and are willing to build different decks each week.
Yep.
So whereas Highlander is just lots of people brew decks and come up with different ideas, and just a different sort of play style as well.
All right, fair. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and head towards MtGMate and what you do there.
Yeah. So
would you consider yourself a developer or an engineer?
Oh, I guess it depends. What's the distinction there for you?
I think when you work for a large organization and they want to parallel Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta, you're an engineer.
Oh, okay.
I think a developer is a little more hacky and down to earth. You just like get it done mentality.
Yeah, I guess that's probably where I am. More a developer than anything. A lot of the stuff behind the scenes is like hopes and dreams and sticky tape, and someone said to me, because I sort of postulated about where my skill set has gone since I've moved into working in MtGMate, and how I'm like I sort of feel like I've got all the skills I had from the professional space, but I haven't really expanded on them because I've been really focusing on just sort of delivering this product. And like, oh, you're in founder mode, you just do what you got to do to keep the lights on, and then you'll bring on new people with new ideas and stuff like that.
And then build on top of it.
But yeah, like I'm definitely a developer in the terms of more down to earth, more hacky. If we see a problem and we can rapidly respond and create a very quick fix for it, that's more the sort of thing that I'm trying to try and accomplish, rather than like let's sit down and over engineer this thing that will never actually develop. Ship.
Just the agile response, being able to pivot quickly.
I think being agile has like really helped with our competitive advantage in many ways. Like just being able to like, we see a problem, we can come up with a solution, we can ship it. Compared to a lot of other people in the space who are on these sort of cookie cutter platforms where if you have an issue with it, you just deal with it and hope that they ship an update.
Yep. And so, are you self-taught, or is this something you went to school for?
I did go to university. I went to university a few times and tried many different degrees before I finally landed on IT, and it was the thing that I was enjoying the most, and I felt that I was doing well at. But in high school, I sort of played around with writing different applications and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then took the leap and made MtGMate.
All right. Yeah. A similar story. In high school, I took C++ and a little bit of Java. Went to university, started out as a comp sci major, hated the program, and ditched it, but kept playing around in my spare time.
Yeah.
Now, as you have actually moved into founder mode for a magic site using these skills, what kind of brought you to combine these interests and build MtGMate.com.au?
Yeah, so like I had always wanted to open a game store. So I worked in my parents' game store most of the way through university, and I had dreams of starting my own game store and stuff like that. But finished my degree, got an actual job in the industry that I was getting the degree in, and so that sort of fell along the wayside, and I just sort of traded cards here and there. So the last job that I had before MtGMate, I actually got made redundant. The company got bought out, and they were shutting down the particular platform that we were on, and so like I knew that I had a 5-month lead time in having to like find a new job and stuff like that. And I decided that this was the perfect opportunity to sort of like give the game store thing a go. I could save aggressively and start getting all my ducks in a row. And at the time, it didn't really feel right to open like a physical game store, and the barrier was a lot easier for me to just build like an online platform rather than like trying to sign leases and hire staff and all that kind of stuff. And there were just a lot of things that I thought were sort of fundamentally broken in the industry, at least in Australia. It seemed too hard to buy cards locally. Websites were too confusing. Shipping took too long. And some of the prices were a bit outlandish, and these were all kind of things that I wanted to fix, right? Rather than having to like, more often than not, we couldn't source cards locally, so you'd have to order them from Channel Fireball or MTG Mint Card, and you'd wait a couple weeks for the shipping to arrive and stuff like that. And I just felt like these were things that I could probably achieve with the skill set I had. And I was tinkering away, and my very first version of the website was actually a Facebook bot. It was just linked to a spreadsheet, and you could type cards into it, and it would tell you if I had it and how much it was. And there was like, if you found the thing that you were looking for, then you could message me on Facebook and ask me about the cards, because that was like just finding problems that I wanted, like simple problems that I wanted to solve, like the problem of everyone going, do you have this card? And then you have to look it up, and no, I don't have this card, or yes, I do. And so like the first was like, I want to stop people asking me these questions.
Yeah, so you've got to create your inventory system.
Yeah. So I just had a spreadsheet, and I was like, I'll give them a really simple way to query the spreadsheet, and they can just do it through the platform they're already on, Facebook, and they would just, you type in cryptic command, and it would be like, hey, there are 4 cryptic commands, and they're $20 each, or whatever it was.
So I guess something this actually begs asking is, so this is your own warehouse. This is not something like TCG Player where it's distributed inventory from multiple people. This is
no. There's a single warehouse. There's a number of staff that pick and ship orders every day. We're actually onto our second office space, or our third location, if you consider the garage the first one. You
congratulations.
Got to start somewhere. And so like our platform is built entirely in house. It has its own buy list. It has its own restock notifications, all that kind of jazz, and we're constantly trying to improve on it and add new features. It's just a single. It's not like a marketplace or anything like that. It's probably more akin to like a Card Kingdom than a TCG Player.
So after MtGMate is set up and it's operating outside of Facebook, right? So
Yeah.
you have your first version of the website set up. So you're we're back in that headspace, right? We want to look back there.
Yep.
How does having MtGMate help you as you are traveling to events as a backpacker or a vendor now? Does it change anything?
I mean, like it was really good to like. I spent the first year or so networking, um, when I started MTG Mate. So like, you know, it's really funny. One of the people that I still keep in touch with, he told me that when he first met and saw MTG Mate at a GP, he thought we were a much larger business than we actually
Oh.
were. Like he thought we were like pretty big, lots of people, and realistically, it was just me and a ragtag group of people that I'd hired for the weekend. um, so like I think like the very first version I shipped probably wasn't as like complete for like going to GPs and stuff like that. These days we have a whole tool set that I can use, and I can look up prices, I can see sales metrics and stuff like that, and it definitely helps me like make decisions when buying, like for buying cards a lot
Yeah.
easier. You can be like, oh, we've moved X number of copies in the last 3 months, and we have, X minus Y copies, so we should probably buy some more if we want to have a 3-month supply.
Yeah.
Um,
And you're flying around to different regions, so you're not looking to buy a small quantity. You're looking to buy large quantities, or it could be small quantities of a lot of cards, or large quantities of things like Soul Ring. So it's not like you are operating at case prices, so to speak, when you're sitting down with somebody else. You're moving
Yeah.
volume.
I want to try and bring like different things that I can pay lots of money on as well.
Yeah.
So like, I can pay pretty reasonable on Soul Ring because we sell a lot of it and it's harder to get. Um, and the traveling is mostly just to sort of complement the buy list that we have. Like the buy list that we have is pretty good at filling stock numbers.
Oh, okay.
But sometimes it's a lot easier to just buy 100 Soul Rings and not have to worry about it for a little while.
Yeah.
Or the hardest things to find are the small cards, because they're the ones that people are more willing to buy, especially when they can't find them. Like, oh, I can't find that spare set of Lana Rolves. These are only $4. I'll just buy another set. So, like the traveling has been like it's been on hold because of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like it's funny because the traveling wasn't necessarily a thing that I wanted to do to help the business. It was actually a goal of mine and a reason for starting up the business in the first place. Like I always wanted to travel, and I felt like I never had enough time when I worked for someone else. And so I figured if I did this magic thing, it would give me the space and chance to do it now. And that's what I did a lot of in 2019. Traveled a lot, met some Japanese vendors, met some American vendors, like just met a whole bunch of people and networked and learned a lot from different people. Sort of brought all those learnings home and tried to implement things where I could and stuff like that. And so just started the traveling again. And it's been interesting because like when I first started traveling, it was a much smaller business. It was just me, and I had a friend at home that was picking orders while I was away. We were maybe shipping like 10 orders a day, a few cards here and there. And now it's like a much bigger operation. I think it's actually harder for me to get away for longer periods of time because you're sort of like, there's a lot more going on. I should probably be a little more attentive to it. So
yeah, you're not ready to put that that additional layer in place so you can step back and.
It's not 100% there yet, but like my team back home is great. Like I have lots of praise for them. I did do a small holiday for about 3 weeks last year, and nothing burned down, nothing broke. So nothing broke, so that was pretty good.
That sounds perfect.
And I haven't heard much this trip, so it sounds like it's all going to be pretty smooth sailing, and I should be home just in time for like Brothers War release, which will probably require me to be a little bit hands-on to get the update ready for all the new cards on the website.
Got it. So, do you serve worldwide, or are you region specific?
Region specific, yeah. We have enough business with just the domestic market
okay.
that we haven't looked to expanding to overseas markets yet. Initially, sort of like the reason for that was I wanted to sort of just focus locally, and I didn't quite know how to handle things like international fraud and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're just very busy enough dealing with just like the local market that's something that we've just stuck to for the time being. I'd love to in the next year sort of like open up things to our neighbors in New Zealand, because I know a few of them have reached out and they have a hard time getting cards there too. And then who knows, maybe we'll do sort of a more international shipping. But I think like a lot of the other regions are already pretty well serviced. Like I don't want to try and compete with TCG Player.
Oh yeah.
It's a race to the bottom that I'm never going to be able to match. Like my labor costs are too high, shipping is too high. You know, I feel like people will only probably get things from us if they're in the US, if it's something they really can't get their hands on.
Yeah.
On TCG Player, and you can get most things there already. So
That's right. Okay, so stepping away from MtGMate directly, when you look at the industry on the whole, there's an amount of automation that can happen when you don't look at the physical side of things, like pulling. Not even, Amazon's not even there yet. They can't even fully automate that part. So when you look at just what happens on the website, what is there any one particular area that you think there's still a gap in the industry?
I mean, I think a lot of people just don't know like that some of these problems can be solved with computers. I hear stories of like certain large vendors in the States having like 12 people that reprice all their cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the technology is getting to the point where like a lot of that could be abstracted away. Like we don't do a whole lot of we have the ability to manually price cards, but a lot of it is just done automatically, and then you have a little bit of human intervention where you need it to be. And I keep seeing like, you know, this new sort of like tech craze at the moment with the AI drawings and all the machine learning.
Yep.
I feel like it's only a small jump before someone figures out how to apply that to Magic prices.
Oh yeah.
There's enough data points out there that I feel like you could throw some machine learning at it, and all of a sudden it's gonna like correctly solve all your market prices there.
Yeah. I
and
think
then like
it's a really good call out.
Yeah, I think like you know, a lot of this industry is still very, very manual. Like I don't think people know that like you can use a computer to log into websites and fetch pieces of data and stuff like that. Like certain vendors will think that this is the way we've always done it. This is the only way you can do it. Like I had a vendor once tell me that it was impossible to scrape prices from TCG Player, and I'm like, that's just flatly not true.
Yeah.
Like, and here is how you do it. Like,
Yeah, right.
Like I think you know it's really cool to see all the sorting robots and stuff like that, and I'm very envious of our US counterparts, because we just can't get access to things like the Roker and the Fizzbatch 9000. A lot of those companies won't ship outside North America, so in a ways I feel a little hamstrung there. But then like again, like you talk to some vendors and they say, oh, I don't see the point in the robot, I can just pay someone for less money, and you're like, you're just not seeing the big picture here. Like,
yeah, money that's saved in one place is money that can be used elsewhere.
Yeah, or just like I think a lot of the things that like people don't realize that time is the finite resource in this industry. It's not money, it's not tech, it's just time. Like you can only hire so many people. There's only so many jobs that people can do in a day. There's only so much attention someone can give you if their task is just sorting Magic cards.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So like being able to like reduce time in certain areas so then you can spend it on more interesting things. Like there's no reason that, you know, the person that sorts cards, you couldn't like teach them, if you replace that sorting part, maybe they could do business intelligence for you and have a look at the data.
Exactly. You can cross-train people, you can retrain people, you can open up new positions and opportunities for both people and the organization if you remove the mundane, the repeated tasks.
Yeah. So like I try and like make things as like comfortable and like try and remove some of those mundane tasks. And like we're never going to avoid some of the things like putting cards away. Like that's just a task that's going to happen. I think it's probably decades off being solved. I've had people tell me like, oh, I could build a robot that does this, but then when you start throwing numbers like, oh, if your robot can pick one card a second and you're shipping 3,000 cards a day, like that's a good number of hours
Yeah.
that one robot will do. You might actually get it done faster with more humans.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and there's also a lot of time that has to go into setting up all the products as well. There's the dexterity issue that is always my concern when it comes to not sorting, but specifically picking.
oh yep,
Because sorting seems like an easier operation overall. You can kind of such and cut things off a pile, however you want to do it, vacuum it, whatever. I don't even know. But when you have 5 rows of cards, and that's just the way things are right now. You either have to come up with something that is delicate enough to move through that 5 row and pull the card you need, or figure out how to store your products differently in
yeah,
order for this, right? So there's a lot of time that goes in, not just to building the robot, but possibly revamping the storage system that everybody uses. And now that's an upfront cost that people have to worry about. Okay, our humans have to rearrange everything. Where's
Yep.
the time for that? You mentioned time before. Here it is again as a blocker.
yeah. Yeah, and I think to extend on that, I think it's only some of the big players in this industry that are going to be the ones that spend the time
Mhm.
and figure that out. The smaller guys are already having a hard time trying to convince them that maybe an automatic pricing system is where you want to be, or
Yeah.
maybe a sorting robot will help you out. Rather than like, hey, what if we reinvented the whole way that you stored cards
Mhm.
and built you a brand new platform? And they'd be like, no, it's just too hard.
Yeah. So we kind of come up against like 2 big obstacles being like time and mentality, because there are a lot of people that, like you said, believe that this is the way it was done before, so this is the way it's got to be, or it can't be done because I said it can't be done. Meanwhile, it can be, and there's a bit of obstinance that needs to be removed. Eyes opened as
Yeah,
necessary.
yeah. I think I've definitely faced a lot of obstinance in this business. I think just people being so sure of like the way they do things as well, and it's sort of hard. You're sort of preaching to the choir, or not preaching to the choir, but like the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Like you're up against a brick wall, and you're like, hey, what if you did this or experimented this? And like, no, there's no point. Like it's just this. There's no change to be made here. I've had some vendors tell me that like they think that the way that they do things is the best way and the only way to do well in this industry. And I have this sort of like funny series of questions that I ask them, and it's like, who do you think is the biggest in this industry? And they commonly will answer like, oh, I think it's Card Kingdom. And I'm like, well, Card Kingdom does so many things different to what you do. Like they don't vend events. Like that's the big one. And a lot of vendors will tell me like the only way to make money in this industry is to be a vendor at an event. I'm like, well, the biggest guy doesn't do that, so I think you might be wrong there.
There might be a flaw in that plan,
Yeah.
a leak in that boat. I think, and I like something you talked about earlier when it came down to automation. Where there are people that just don't want to trust, like the computer. They still have people repricing their cards, and that's like the opposite of like what we want to see in this industry. Looking at, for me, a tool that could be used across the industry that I believe more people should invest in, that it seems to be lacking in a lot of places, is that automation, where you don't want 12 humans entering prices into a computer to just be accepted. Instead, you would want that computer to spit out 12 different reports of, hey, this is what we're going to do with the pricing, make changes or hit OK.
Yeah.
And you just get that quick human verification just to make sure.
I mean, like,
that's it.
you could even, like, if you don't have the human verification, like, let's say the computer gets it wrong, 0.5% of the time or something like that. The money that you lose out on that 0.5% is probably greater than the cost, or sorry, probably smaller than the cost of hiring the 12 people to get it exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of like that's sort of the thing that like this is one of the approaches I sort of take is like, I think this is going to solve like 95% of the problems that we have, and the 5% that it doesn't solve, like, we'll tackle them when they come up, and if it costs us a little bit of money, we probably saved it by not taking the more hands-on approach or stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, because you and I are coming at this from a tech first standpoint.
Yeah,
It seems like a lot of people came at this from the sports cards side of things, which is it's not, I don't want to say it's antiquated in the sense of like, sports cards have been around forever, it's old, it's fuddy-duddy, but like a lot of those guys came from a world where they got all the information from periodicals,
yeah,
from
and
pricing
like
magazines.
15, almost 20 years ago, like, the whole trading game was a completely different landscape.
Yeah.
It was like, how many numbers can you memorize in your head? And if you know more numbers on cards than the other guy, then you'll probably like do better out of it, because you'll be able to value things appropriately. Whereas these days, everyone has a smartphone, everyone has access to all this information, all these tools. Like, you don't have to do it the same way. Like,
No.
I couldn't imagine trying to trade the same way that I did 20 years ago, like I trade cards now. It's just not possible.
No.
Like, everyone has all these tools.
And while we're talking about trading and looking at tools that everybody has, do you think there's anything like in particular that could be leveraged at all or better across all levels of the industry, from vendors all the way down to backpackers or just people at an LGS?
Yeah, so like, if everyone learned a little bit of coding, they'd probably be a bit better. But that's an
Yeah, right.
unrealistic goal. Like, I think like, a really cool piece of tech that I think people should be using is like just Scryfall. Like, it's such a low barrier, and like, I think I spent a day learning the Scryfall query language.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a powerful tool. Like, and it's for players. You can be like, okay, what weird thalids do I need for my blue-black deck that costs less than 3? That's a query you can write in Scryfall. But for like speculators, you can actually write a query that's like, which rares in Modern have never been reprinted and are less than $3, and it will give you those cards too. And I think Scryfall's amazing, and I've sort of encouraged all my staff to like spend a bit of time, figure it out, because it's just so easy to answer like a whole bevy of questions that you might ask in Magic from all different aspects, rather than being like just trying to scratch your head and remember things off the top. Or
Yep.
I really get saddened when people use Gatherer. Like, it's just such an awful tool. There are just better ones out there.
That is a bullet point on my list of things to do, is actually get better with the Scryfall query language, because there have been times I played the Unfinity release.
Yep.
And I had I can't remember the name of it, sitting on a table behind me, the colorless mythic with no mana value, and for one generic, you reveal the card, and you get to choose any.
Oh, like the mental magic card.
Yeah, the mental magic card.
Yeah.
And so I was playing Bant stickers.
Yep.
And I was on my phone, so it was just even more difficult. And I just needed to find instants that were either blue or green that cost less than 3. And it was just very difficult from the GUI interface, and I just didn't have a great understanding of the query language, so I just left up 2 tabs on my phone, one for blue and one for green, and that's how I got through the event. But had I learned that interface better, it would have actually just helped me play the event better.
Yeah, like, I would encourage like anyone that's involved in this industry, write down a bunch of like interesting questions that you want to ask about Magic, and then see if you can write the query to solve it. And you just got to do it a few times, and you'll remember that E: is the set code, and that's how you can narrow things by that.
Mm-hmm.
You'll know that the collector number is CN, and you can use the alligator braces to decide like if its collector number's less than 260. You can ask for variants, you can ask for border types, you can have it show all the unique prints if you want to see all the printings of Elvish Mystic. And like, it's incredibly well documented. And then like, once you write a few of them, like, you can punch out most of the queries that you're going to ask, and then occasionally you'll just have to look at the source and the little reference material, and it'll tell you exactly that last little bit you need
Yeah.
for the question. But like, yeah, I think there should definitely, like, I'd love to see more Scryfall adoption. And I see tools like Moxfield. Moxfield supports Scryfall, and so like you can, all its information is actually backed off Scryfall, and you can do little queries in there as well for certain things. MTG Ban, their pricing tool uses Scryfall query language, a sort of hybrid of it as well.
Okay.
And so like it's really cool to see that sort of becoming a standard as well in the industry. And yeah, that's probably my biggest thing that I'd say people should use. That, and like Google search shortcuts just saves a bunch of time.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't know that you can in Chrome you can actually set search shortcuts. So I have one set up, and it's CKF. And it will, whenever I search a card, it'll automatically fill out the search as though it's Card Kingdom, but it'll have the right query parameters for foil, so I don't actually have to click the foil tab. Because normally you go like ponder, and then you gotta click the
foil tab. Yep.
Yeah, and so like I have a couple of those set up for their buy list and other various things. So rather than like typing in Card Kingdom ponder and then clicking the first link on Google and then clicking the foil link, it'll just jump straight to the thing. And that sort of stems from my whole like time is the finite resource here, and how can I save as much of it and make
the efficiency
make
aspect of things. Yeah, absolutely. For whatever reason, Chrome shortcut Amazon to AMAON, which saves me more time than I want to admit.
Yeah.
Like it just accidentally removed a letter in my my search. All right, that's fine.
Yep.
I'll take the hack. I think that's interesting because usually a lot of people would come down and actually say, like, go to the general question of like, what can we use more? More people would probably pick a tool. They're like, oh, you should like learn how to do this, code this, or learn how to master something else, not use Scryfall, which is
I just think the barrier to entry on Scryfall is so low. Like if I told someone you should learn a programming language, that's a big investment, right? Yeah. And some people might spend a weekend, they might get the hang of it. Other people might spend a weekend and barely get past Hello World. But everyone kind of knows how to use Scryfall and how to use search. It's just how can you get the most out of the tool that you're currently using.
Yeah.
And you see it in all kinds of different aspects. Like, the classic one I see is like you see people scrolling with a spreadsheet and they want to get to the bottom and they just drag and they wait for like 30 seconds because it's a long spreadsheet. But like I think it's like Control Shift down or something will jump automatically to it. And like you just got to like take the second and be like, all right, there must be a faster way to do this.
Yeah,
I've just got to memorize what it is, and then all of a sudden your life is just a little bit better because of it.
Yeah, you had to look it up once, write it down, and then from then on you're just going to start accruing that time back in your life.
Totally. Yeah. Like everyone knows copy paste, right? We don't have to type out the thing looking at it from a different tab. Like you just copy paste, and like it's just an extension of that. So.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting and cool answer. It's not what I was expecting, in all honesty, because a lot of people will just tell you something like learn Excel. Like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
To do what? I don't know. Just learn. Make a pivot table. I don't know. Learn what is it? V code or whatever is inside Excel.
Oh,
so you can,
VS Code.
VS Code, so you can go open a web page and scrape it in there. Like, cool. What are you trying to tell me by saying learn Excel?
Yeah.
But learn Scryfall is a very applicable thing for us as Magic players, as collectors. That's fantastic.
But yeah, I think everyone across the whole industry, from like the player to the person at the store when someone asks for a card that they both can't remember the name of, to like the speculator who wants to figure out what might be their next targets. Like you can write a query for most of these things, and it'll get. I think like Scryfall has definitely made the tech landscape of Magic way better. Like I don't think I could build MtGMate as well without Scryfall. It's done. It's jumped everything like years in advance.
For sure.
Like you don't have to like get your own images for your own project. You can like, cool, Scryfall has it for me. I can get this hacking project that I'm working on, like a good jump ahead, rather than being like, oh, I wrote it but I didn't bother to do images yet because that seems too difficult to solve.
Scryfall put together so many resources to build their platform, that making it available through their API has simplified development for individuals like us so much compared to what it used to be when we had to go out and hit like MTG JSON to get the gatherer side of things. Then try and take that data and throw that at the TCG Player API to go get prices, and somewhere along the way, maybe get an image. Like,
Yep.
that used to be so much work, and Scryfall has done so much and made that data available in such a nice little package. Like you said, it's fantastic,
And it's the best price. It's free.
It's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, which actually leads into the last question I have, which I think is kind of this big thought project. What area do you think would greatly improve from the democratization of development or engineering efforts? And that could be anything from like somebody opening up their website with an API or sales information, or making like shopper profile analytics available.
So like I think the best thing that like if we could decide, if like collectively as a community Magic could decide on like a really good standard for storing like your collection and stuff, I think that would like do leaps and bounds for the industry. Just being able to be like, this special code represents this card, and then every website could have a CSV import, and like every different collection tracking tool could all use the same kind of standard. So it's not like, oh, I have to write a converter from deckbox.org to cube tutor to like all of these different things. Like I think just having a really simple standard for that would like make things incredibly easy. Like the number of times you would get a spreadsheet from someone and it's like they've typed in the set codes the way they think they should be or something like that.
Yep.
And then you're like, I can't really parse this collection without a human because you've decided to call this particular thing, you've called it Ravnica, not Ravnica City of Guilds.
Oh, God.
You know, you've called it 6th edition with the number 6 rather than classic 6th edition, all written in text. And I think Magic took, like Wizards took a sort of a step in the right direction when they sort of put those machine readable codes on it. But it'd be really nice if they stopped changing the rules or how everything works and just, I don't know, maybe they print a UUID on every card or something. Like it'd be really cool if every unique card had a very simple code, and then a person could just go to the spreadsheet and go, oh, I have, RNA 2364B. And that's the thing that says like this is a foil, card from this set, and this is the exact copy that you're kind of expecting. And it's sort of heading in that direction. Like the extended arts are, have their own code and stuff like that. But they change the rules every different set.
Yeah.
This Warhammer set, for instance, the traditional foils that are available in the Warhammer set are collector numbers that sit out the regular range of the collector numbers, when traditionally it's just the alternate of the card that's in the correct collector number. And stuff like that sort of bugs me as a software engineer.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what the set's changed the rules for Magic, let me figure out how to fix my website to handle this now. Or the heads you lose, tails I win. Oh, now we have double-sided cards that have the same card on the back and front. Yeah. Like, stuff like that. But, I think a standardization on, like, how we handle data between different sources would be great. Because, every time I deal with, like, another vendor that, like, wants to sell me cards or an individual, like, I'm very fortunate that I have the ability to write a script and I can kind of figure out how to translate their data into our data. But if it was just like, here's the standard code, it's the quantity and the standardized code, and that's all you needed to know. And that code would tell you if it was English foil, Japanese, Galaxy foil, whatever. Like, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Has something that's kind of like that, where they have like, kind of where the set symbol is, they have like a unique code for cards, but it doesn't always ring true as being unique. And yeah, that's a thing that I think would help.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're angling for an ISO.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, and like
That's standard.
it's kind of close. Like Scryfall is like done UUIDs,
Mhm.
which is great. But like I think like for the like vendor side of things, like the UUID and Scryfall just points to a printing of a card and not it encompasses all the different variants. Whereas like I think having like some kind of standard like a multiverse ID, but it tells you that it's also foil, it's also Japanese, it's all of the different characteristics that make that card completely unique. And if the only difference is like a language, there's a separate code for the other language as well. So then there's no confusion, or you can reference just one field in one column in a database rather than a collection of like 3 or 4.
Yeah, then the translation layers like you're talking about. Like,
Yeah. And I think that should be printed on the card somewhere or something so that you can look at a card and be like, I don't need to know anything about this card except for this little code down the bottom, and that will identify in all of these systems.
yeah.
And then I think that'll help vendors be able to like buy cards from players. It'll help players keep track of their collections and know which things that they're missing and all that kind of stuff. And inputting things into systems should be easier rather than like a million drop downs like, oh, I have this card but I have the Japanese version and it's like it's a foil,
Yeah.
and it's actually this variant or something. Like,
Yeah. To the point you made, the Yu-Gi-Oh set code and the Pokemon, the way WotC handled Pokemon, for me functions similarly to that, but only when you're using the correct resource.
yeah.
So if you're on Troll and Toad, for anybody that doesn't know, you can type in the set code and the number of a Yu-Gi-Oh card, and it'll pop every card with that set code and number. And like you said, for the most part, that is one unique card. Sometimes they have recycled. For Pokemon, if you use the collector numbers, so numerator over denominator, it will get you exactly that card and all the other ones that match, which is, at this point in time, a decent amount, but it gets you where you need to go. A lot easier than typing Charizard.
Yeah, or Terra.
Yeah.
Birds of Paradise. Which one?
Yeah, exactly. But, if Birds of Paradise were card X over Y in a set, on Troll and Toad you could just literally type in that number, and then, you would get that one specific Bird of Paradise from that set because it could have been shifted somewhere else in the set code from, revised to 4th to 5th to 6th.
Yeah.
But you would just get an expanded amount. So, like, Troll and Toad has done a little bit of that kind of standardization, but more for the virtue of their own employees than the greater audience at large for games. Like, that was a resource that I was taught to use when I was both buying and selling. That was like our quote unquote shortcut to find cards faster.
Yep.
But
yeah, we have an internal one that we use, and it's like a combination of the different attributes.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be nice that if we didn't have to invent our own, that
Yes.
there just was one that existed.
Yep.
You could punch that into Scryfall, and Scryfall's like, yes, here is Portuguese Terra from 5th edition. Like,
yep. Perfect. That's exactly what you wanted. And I think that's great. I think standardization isn't something that a lot of people think about because they don't have to deal with it. It is the data that they are looking for is just presented back to them as they asked for it. They don't want to see how that sausage is made, so to speak. They don't want to know how you had to go take the data from your system to merge it with TCG players' API data and pull that together. They don't care. They just care that what you presented is what they need.
Yep.
Now, that's the last question I had. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, either about MtGMate or anything that's been going on? I know you were just at A30. You're going to be here for a little bit, like you said, kind of moving and shaking in the U.S.
No, I think I'm pretty much conversationed out at this point. We've hit a lot of points. I could talk about Magic 30, but I think a lot of people will be able to read about that on Reddit.
Yep.
And I think people were very vocal about how well or not well run that event was. So yeah.
All right, Nick. Well, thanks for joining us. I hope everybody enjoyed this portion of the podcast, and we will be back shortly with our picks. So we decided just now that I went first last week, so this week you get to take it away with the first.
Alrighty, so I will take it away first. Beforehand, I want to again thank Nick for coming on. If anyone listening is in Australia, MtGMate is the place to go.
Yes.
So, my pick is Aetherflux Reservoir. Well, why are you picking some card that's about to be reprinted? I'm actually picking it because it's about to be reprinted.
Mhm.
So, it's been reprinted before, and it was in mystery booster cards, both the convention version and the retail version. Now, if you take a look at the stocks graph, and this is why I'm picking it, you can see that when the retail version of the mystery boosters came out, which was right around when the pandemic became official, like March, early March, we hit at that point an all-time high on the card of $6, and then it cratered down to below $4. Fast forward to today, and we've started to see a little dip again because we know it's getting reprinted in a retro border and Brothers War. It was just $12. And before it went from close to 7 down to 3, and we've now quadrupled up from that.
Yep.
Now, the retro border non-foils are obviously going to be pretty prevalent. Why am I picking this card? Because this is an EDH card. It's a card that existed at a time before a lot of people, according to Wizards metrics, which, obfuscated though they are, do indicate more people are playing the game now than were before the pandemic. This is the kind of card that when it gets more eyes on it, it has significantly more liquidity and significantly more demand. Now, while it's not necessarily the win con of choice for CEDH anymore, the way that it was in 2018, 2019, it's still a card that sees a lot of play because it's generic color agnostic. It goes into Spells Matters decks. It goes into life gain decks. It just goes into general value decks as well. It sides into literally everything. If you have a deck with an Isochron Scepter, you run it in there. Doesn't matter. It's also a card that people have sitting around in trade binders, just lying around from when they picked it up. A lot of people I know picked up 2 or 3 copies in case they ever wanted another one for an EDH deck. It's also nice because it goes into the casual players pool as well as the competitive players pool, which gives us a very broad market on this card. Now, the interesting thing about this is obviously you're never going to see this in Constructed unless it's, an invisible kitchen table player that may have it in some life gain deck that's a 60 card. Other than that, this is EDH players all day long.
Yes.
So as far as timeline, what I am saying is, now this one's going to be kind of interesting. So typically what I would say is wait for release day.
Okay.
Because on release day, the card's going to tank on TCG player. It's not really the case anymore because Wizards is letting brick and mortars now sell stuff on pre-release weekend. So as far as picking this up, I would honestly imagine even with the moved up timeline, you'd probably want to wait about a week and a half because then we get a bunch of this product opened. There's going to be a bunch of it populated out there. You'll have like peak singles. You'll have your pre-release and your release weekends out in the wild. I would expect, just based on the previous metric of us seeing a 50% loss in price. Now, I don't necessarily think we're going to get quite that low where we'll go down to like $5.50, $6. But I would be comfortable long term sitting on this at about $7, expecting a reasonable rate of return. Now, the reason for that is because if you take a look at the stocks graph, again, after we hit rock bottom in April of 2020, we hit a peak shortly thereafter, 12 months later. So timeline, once you pick it up, I'd expect, honestly, about the same return on this. Now, we may see it in a secret lair or something, but I wouldn't expect it too much. Because one thing that Wizards has been fairly reasonable about doing is when they have cards in these like chase versions over the last couple years, ever since Ikoria, they tend to not reprint them again for a quantity of time because they want that product to carry it rather than a secret lair or something like that. So I'd expect us to be sitting at around, we're getting in at $7, and in about 12 months, we could probably reasonably expect to get out at about 12 to 15. Now, quantity-wise, I'd be looking at, honestly, you don't need a whole lot of these. You don't want EDH playsets either, where you want quantities of 5. That said, if we're getting it at about $7, I wouldn't mind sitting on about 10 of these things and just parking them. Because I spent $70 on Sarkhan's Unsealings, and that is clearly not working out for me. This one is way more likely to work out for you. So this is a much more sound investment of your $70 if you wanted to go to 10.
Yep.
Now, in terms of profitable buy listing, you may have to wait a little bit longer. And that may, again, depend on how paper events go. If we start getting an explosion of events, more papers out there, more EDH is being played, you may be able to profitably buy list a little bit sooner. But if you're looking to trade out, I would expect about 10 to 12 months here. On the buy list timeline, I'd be looking at a little bit longer, because you'd want to be basically at the point where on the stocks graph we were in like late May.
Yeah.
Is where you would have been able to just floor it out there and just make fat bank. So that's the timeline I'd be looking at. I think it's solid because it's just a nice look of a card that's getting reprinted and has the opportunity to hit a new floor and then set a new floor after it rises again. So we're going to have a new floor now that's higher than it was before, and then it'll go back up to what is the reasonable rate. Because even right now, it had basically gotten up to close to its all-time high of $12 at about 11 and a quarter. So we were basically right back there again before this reprint happened. So very confident about this one in the mid to long term, in that like 10 to 12 month range. And I just think it's really solid with the reprint coming, because it also means that as Brothers War comes out, people are going to be crazy about this set, because it's a throwback to objectively the best storyline Magic has ever had. Jace is a hack and he sucks. This was great. So I expect a lot of content creators to touch on this stuff too. More eyes, more liquidity, more value.
Nope, I like the pick overall. Aetherflux Reservoir is a card I kind of keyed on when it came out, not like Panharmonicon, but something I did pick up in a small quantity, and I think I still have them all kicking around. And I just like it overall for Commander. Like you said, it just goes in everything. And when you look at rec for this card, out of the like almost 15 most popular Commanders on page 1, like 4 of them are have a play rate of under 50%, the lowest being 47. So 40% of the Daxos Blessed by the Sun, the mono white deck, play this card, and it just goes up from there, right? To pure combo decks with Kentaro and Crick, where you can just do dumb things with like Bolus, Citadel, and Sensei's Divining Top. But to your point, you don't just have to play it in that. One of the decks that's not really represented in here is a Spellslinger deck. And this is a really good way to just end the game with a Spellslinger deck when you're just casting a lot of stuff. You don't want to play Izzet, you can just play Mono Blue Talrand Dirtles, make a bunch of 2/2 Drakes, and if that doesn't close out the game, Aetherflux Reservoir probably can, where you just fire your laser at somebody and erase them from the game. Like, it just plays really well across the majority of the format, and I think it's an underserved card because of that. So yeah, the content creator push is going to be great for this card, and if you got to sit on it for a while, I think it's perfectly fine. You get out of get out.
It's not like you're sitting on a $500 Time Vault, which is still one of my favorite picks. But
it was a good one.
Yeah,
but like, what's the worst? You just put this in your binder and you make profit on it when you trade it out. Like, I think that's perfectly fine, because you're still serving the community. You're not buying a card that is just like some of the picks that I touched on that I made with like a little more narrow, and you're like, I'm gonna buy these Enchantress only cards. Like, no, Aetherflux Reservoir just kind of goes everywhere, but it just seems like people forgot about it. They don't realize it. They just need a guiding hand. And I really like the pick overall. My pick, I'm sticking with the theme of like, in the shadow of Brothers War we operate. And for me this week, I'm picking Defiler of Vigor. This is a card that I was going to pick around for the next couple of weeks before I made the pick, and just go with cards that worked really well with it. And as you can see, this basically
is so good.
It is extremely good. It just tanks and then ropes. And this is why I like this card right now, because it's just flat, and I don't think it's going anywhere. This is Flat Fuck Friday all over again. So I added this to my list about a month ago in October, and Card King was buying 40 at about $1.10. There were 392 at 440 on TCG Player. As of my choosing this as my pick, Card Kingdom is buying more, 63 for less at about $1. But I think that's perfectly fine, because our plan isn't to out the buy list right now, because this card is insane. And this doesn't go in every Commander deck that plays green, but rather any Commander deck running creatures with a high density of green permanents, because you need to put the counters on something, and any green permanent triggers this. So you don't want green to be your splash color, you want it to be your primary permanent color. And after that, your creatures can be whatever color, it doesn't freaking matter. Now, across the entire of the format, like, reading the card, its utility is pretty on the nose, and that's where it falls in the format. People are going to play this in any and every capacity they can. It's basically a Crater Hoof et al. Alternative. You know, it's not Pathbreaker, Ibex, Pain Bacon, the Decimated Provinces, but to a value growth engine, something like Shalai, the angel with the Gavity Township ability. And this also triggers various counter base effects. Like there's the mutate style ability. It's like when this creature gets a counter, do a thing, right? This is just a ton.
Yeah.
And there's even unique infinite combo engine, or sorry, unique. There's so many ways to go infinite with this card, and there are a number of unique ways to do it. Something like Cloudstone Curio that just lets you bounce that green permanent or creature. Creature is a permanent, that green permanent over and over and over again. Teamer Sabertooth, that's another popular quote combo engine. Just that one card, just to continue to trigger this. It also powers up the Outlast keyword. Outlast! You can give all your creatures flying with one Falconer. Like, that's insane. And
I forget that ability exists.
exactly, because it's sorcery speed and terrible. But when you can just...
It's so bad.
When you have Falconer on board and then Defiler hits later and you just play a green permanent, now all your creatures have a singular counter in flying. And that's a lot better.
Yeah.
Now, it's all of this that I like. It's everything about this card. It's everything that it does. It's much less salty than a number of similar cards, Crater Hoof, which means it gets the casual appeal behind it. And it can combo out in a myriad of ways, which also helps push the appeal to people who are more spiky.
Yeah.
And, as Pink Floyd said, all in all, it's just another brick in the wall. That's it. This is just fantastic for Commander. Now, the reason I said we're operating in the shadows of Brothers War. My timeline. With Bro about to release, this cools DMU main set and draft set pack cracking. CB opening's going to stay high because of the Legends inserts, I believe.
Yeah.
And that will further suppress the price of the card. Not by much, but it will keep it down. Not like main set and draft set opening. So I expect this to continue to rope through the rest of Dominaria block, so that's 3 more sets, I believe. Unless we get some very strong green cards to pull attention. Like it gets pushed into standard or something like that.
Yeah.
If that does not happen, I would expect this to be about a year-long hold, despite fairly aggressive sales numbers. So it's the same thing that you were talking about. We're looking at about a year here to see some real good growth on this, unless there's a content creator push. Now, in the last month, 970 approximate Nearman copies sold, 260 LP copies sold. So this thing has velo behind it. And sustained demand will drain supply, but I think it's going to be longer term. There's, like I mentioned, 433 vendors currently with this card, so it's going to take a while to get there. And I think demand might cool a little bit as people focus, as we get back to new sets. We're just going to see that wave of demand, like, oh, new set, here's the spark, we're going to go chase that, and then people will come back. Unless there's something big and mopey to, well, maybe not mopey, just big and dumb to play alongside this. Then it gets that push. But about a year. And I'm not even looking at buy list yet. I don't know what that's going to look like. This is basically a year to trade out. It might be closer to 15 to 18 months to buy list, in all honesty. But we're buying this as an EDH staple, and I think I'd rather move this to locals than expect to move this to buy list.
Yeah.
Now, reprint equity on this, I think this one's pretty cut and dry. Unless these appear... And when I say these, I mean the Defilers in a Commander product in the future. I don't expect them or any other Phyrexians to reappear in standard sets or supplementals. We might get some. That's out. This is outside of DMU block. We know we're going to get some later on, but they're not going to reprint the Defilers in like 3 sets from now, whenever that is.
It's not Colossal Dreadmaw.
Exactly.
We're not going to get 3 printings of this in standard.
So once we move out of Dom block, that's what I expect. Unless we get Phyrexians in a Commander product, that's it. They're gone.
Yeah.
Now, by quantity, I've picked up about a dozen of these a few weeks ago once it started to rope, and I just tossed them in a box for later. At current market prices, I think it's a solid amount to sit on to allow you to trade them slowly, as the entry point is fairly cheap. And basically, I would just trickle them out that way. Picking up 12 is basically about $50, something like that.
Ish, yeah.
Yeah, because they're bouncing
4.
around. Yeah, 4 and change. And it's not that I don't believe in the buy list number for this card. We need this card to 5x on buy list to start making
Yeah.
profit on this, and I think that could honestly happen, going from a 1 to 5. It's not
Yeah.
out of the question. I can't tell when that's going to be, though, because it has been this cheap for about a month now.
Yeah.
And Card Kingdom opens quantity, we know that. So they're probably driving their own prices down a bit here. But they're also buying more than they have in the past, which means they're seeing demand. So it's difficult to really come up with that number. That's why I think trade is the opportunity here. We can out them faster and for more and churn this card, this money a little bit better and a little bit faster than sitting on it forever. That's not something I like to advocate for often, but it is definitely a way to make sure that you are able to get your investment back faster. You can reach the black faster by trading by trading some amount of these out to break even, and then keep the rest in the vault, and then out them later, and that's profit. This is definitely a scheme you can use here. It's something that you'll get by on here. I just think it's going to take, like I said, about a year to really get out, at like closer to 5, maybe 6, based on current demand for the set. So that's my expectation for this. And if it continues to rope throughout Bro and you want to re-up, I think that's perfectly fine too. Keeping a couple of these in the binders is going to keep interest on them locally, and that's the other reason I would look at to trade them more than anything else, because they should churn pretty quickly just based on sales numbers alone. We looked at 1,200 in about a month, just from LP and NM. It should not
Pretty
be that
good
difficult.
Velocity.
Yeah, it should not be that difficult for you to move these locally. So that's where I am right now.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about this is that, like, being in green, it's such a casual, friendly color. It's also interesting that this was their attempt at effectively, I guess, fixing Phyrexian mana.
Yeah, I didn't
because you can only pay 1, but you can do it on literally every
Everything.
spell. So it has really good abusability, kind of, but it's still like an insanely good casual card. It's also, again, with that amount of liquidity and such a seemingly low reprint equity, because I agree, I don't think we're ever, like, this is their attempt to fix Phyrexian mana. This is what they're trying to do, to say, oh, well, maybe it was a mistake to make Mental Misstep free. I don't expect them to go back to that mechanic very much throughout the course of Magic, because anytime they've done something like it, it's just completely buggered the game.
Yes.
So I think the reprint equity is really low on this one, and I think it is one that's similar to you. I would be comfortable at, like, maybe even 24 of them. Now, the interesting thing about Defiler is I think it kind of falls into, like, the Murktide effect, like I call it. Murktide Regent. The reason that the variant foils are as low as they are and the set foil is as high as it is because of exactly what you mentioned, collector boosters. You could not get the non-sketch foil in collector boosters. It only came in set packs. So if you were to want to go for foils, I'd have to check for Dom U. I know it's been pretty consistent across collector boosters. I don't know if you can get the foil of this from Dom U boosters as readily as you can from the set boosters. So that may be something else to keep in mind, along with the non-foil is, and Dom U, I think there's only 2 to 3 slots for rare or mythic non-foils in there. That's not a lot.
No, the price would indicate that you're right. They're like 20 to 40 cents off.
Okay. So yeah, I would expect that you'll see a little bit of growth there and that you'll see some kind of stagnation, literally because the boosters that are being opened for people to get products just don't contain this card. So you'll see stagnation on other cards while this card continues to climb because people just aren't opening set boosters. So real solid long term, I think.
Yeah. But that's it for me this week. Anything else?
Nope, that does it.
Nope. So that'll be it for this week. For MTG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt, I am Reptar, you are
at Thirsty Sizzler.
We'll see you next week.
See ya.